Hey, what's up y'all? This is William, the permaculture consultant, and today I'm going to show you two different methods of composting all of your garden scraps. By the end of this video, you're going to know two different methods to get rid of and benefit the rest of your garden with these garden scraps. Real quick housekeeping notes: if you need a consultation, hit up the email down below, in person or phone. Now, it's getting about that time of the year where your summer garden is coming to an end. For example, this is my tomato bed right here, and the tomato production has gone downhill quite a bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear them. I'm gonna keep these guys, all these peppers. I'm gonna try to overwinter these guys, keep them protected through the winter, and see if I can get peppers out of them the following year as well. It's coming to that point where a lot of things are getting cleared from the garden. I've got my perennial bed over here. I've got my tomato bed here. I've got, I don't even remember what this was. It's written down in my GardenAid app. I also have tomatoes, or not tomatoes, but I also have peppers going down here. This is where we did the instant garden. If this is another perennial bed, this has watermelons going through on one half of it right now, so we're gonna let those keep going because I still have watermelons being produced. And then also these two beds right here. You've already seen me do the electroculture rods in this bed. If you want to check that out, go ahead and check that video back out. These both previously had sweet potatoes in it, and all of the sweet potato vines either got fed to the pigs behind me, they're clearing around those buildings right now, or they got stacked up over here. That method is going to come in later. First, we're going to start with the easiest method, and that's basically chop and drop. Now, you want to be careful with this method. You could make things harder on yourself depending on what you plan on planting next. Give me 1 second and we'll get right into it. So the first method is just basic chop and drop, and that's where you cut it down from the base. You leave your roots attached. You cut it down from the base, and then you just lay it on top. Now, if you have some grasses and stuff like that, then it might be better to actually just, especially depending on the variety of grass, it might be better to just rip it out. Careful you don't find any thorns like I just did. Rip it out. You can also crimp everything down, but you're basically just gonna cut it off at the base. You want the roots to decompose in the ground, and then just lay it on the surface and let it decompose on the surface. Now, if you have beds, you want to make sure you're running, I'm gaining some space right now, but whenever you have beds, you want to make sure everything is running lengthways, so that way you're not getting into your walkways or your pathways or into any surrounding beds or anything like that. And this is by far the easiest method of composting. Depending on how much garden scraps you're actually going to be cutting down, it will help suppress the weeds and help feed and fertilize through the it's at the end of summer right now, or getting close to the end of summer, transitioning into fall, and this is the perennial bed, so the application makes sense. It's not like I'm needing to get this bed ready for cultivation next year or anything like that. I'm basically just letting it decompose in place and letting my already planted perennials benefit. If I need to add more perennials, then I'll just move some out of the way, and basically just follow it that way. Now, what this is going to do, like I was saying before, it's going to help protect the bed from compaction and any other elements and stuff like that. You want to make sure, if it's super weedy like this one is, you want to make sure that you're not accidentally cutting down your perennials, like this one apple tree right here. This guy in my right hand is an apple tree. The guy in my left hand is a weed, and I want to get rid of the weeds, not my apple tree. Alrighty, so there we go. This whole bed is now basically going to compost up until the point, well, I mean even past the point, but it's all getting ready for next spring. I could even go ahead and plant whatever other perennials I wanted to this fall into this bed. Right now I'm just stomping everything down, kind of not creating too much compaction, just making sure nothing blows away in these high Texas winds and stuff. But this is just going to decompose in place basically. And this is going to be the last time I mess with it. It's going to provide awesome conditions for the microbes to thrive. It's going to keep the direct sun off of it. It's going to keep direct rainfall from hitting the ground, because if you think about it, every time a raindrop falls from the sky, lands finally, thousands of feet later, or hundreds of feet, depending on how low the clouds are, it's coming with some force. And if you have bare soil, it will create a small layer of compaction. Also, rain is slightly acidic, so it's going to dissolve some of the inorganic material like the salt, the sand, silt, clay, all that type of stuff, and create, it's going to dissolve a little bit, and it's going to leave a little salt crust on top of the soil, which is bad. I know that that bed, with that chop and drop method we just did, that bed is going to be light years better next spring once we hit the next growing season than it was this season. So it's just going to keep getting better and better in that bed. Now, like I said, that isn't necessarily, like if I plan on growing sweet potatoes or potatoes in this bed next year, then I know that it's not really going to do me any favors. It's not going to make it easy on me. What I could do though is if I took for example, tomatoes like I have in the bed over there, and I just moved some of the mulch out of the way, some of the green mulch out of the way, put my tomato start down in there, or pepper start down in there, this would be a perfect application for chop and drop because I'm not having to worry about cultivating or anything like that. It might make it a little bit annoying to do any vining species, like if I were to do watermelons or squashes or anything like that in here. It might be a little annoying to try to manage that. Maybe not. I'll have to try that in the future. But this is a very awesome technique to put in your back pocket and use it when applicable. That's the thing with permaculture. All of this stuff only makes sense if you use it in the right application. Also, this method doesn't necessarily produce the most amount of microorganisms. So I'm going to show you another method that's basically going to be farming microorganisms, which is the reason any of this even grows, is because of the microbes in the soil. This next method is basically going to be growing them, farming them, and getting them ready for application in the garden next spring or even later this year, depending on where you are. Now this second method is going to be a little bit more complex, but the benefit is outstanding. Like, it's probably the best thing that you can do for your garden outside of just planting like a cover crop or something like that. Sorry, there was a wasp flying around my head. Now the second method, there's a little bit more to it, but you're going to end up with very, very high quality compost, as you can see in the background right over there. You're going to end up with some of the best additive. It's better than any fertilizer you can buy. It's better than any compost that you can buy. It's literally the best thing that you can make for your garden, and that is just a simple 1 ingredient compost. Now right here is a compost cage that's about 4.5 feet tall, and then it's about 4 feet in diameter as well. You don't want to go any smaller than that. If you go smaller than that, there's a chance that you don't have a big enough area basically to colonize or to provide a home for all of the microbes that are going to be inhabiting that area. But it's super simple. You basically can just take the stuff from the garden, the waste from the garden, apply it directly to your cage over there, and then just pile it up till your cage gets full. And once it gets full, then you water everything down, make sure everything is completely saturated. And then you're going to let it sit for about 4 days, and then you're going to flip it. You're going to make sure the top goes to the center, the bottom goes to the top, and the middle goes to the bottom. And then you're going to repeat the process again, and then that way all 3 sections of your compost pile goes through that thermophilic phase. This is a hot composting method. It's going to go through that thermophilic phase, and you've completely wiped out any weed seeds, any pathogens, anything like that. If you want more detail, then check out the 2 ingredient compost pile video that I did a while back. There's actually a whole playlist, shows you from beginning to end how the compost progresses, what it looks like, stuff like that. This is going to be even simpler because it's a 1 ingredient compost pile. Knowing that you're at the end of your gardening cycle, the carbon to nitrogen ratios within your garden are going to be a little heavier on the carbon side, so it might not heat up as well, but a simple fix to that is just add nitrogen. The nitrogen you could add could be like fresh, new green material like this, like you could mow your grass and add it to there, and then that could be your nitrogen, but you could also just pee on the pile. So I said it's a 1 ingredient compost pile, but it's more like 1.5. But the majority of the compost substrate is just going to be your garden scraps. As you can see down here, I've kind of gotten started. As I'm adding it to this cage, I'm soaking it in this bucket of water right here. One way around that is just to use fresh green cuts from your garden and then apply it directly to your compost cage, that will make sure that the moisture is almost perfect. It's at that 50% moisture content. Otherwise, you can just let it dry and then rehydrate it right before adding it to your compost pile. Now, if you are going to be doing this method, then you want to obviously make sure that anything branchy, anything thick, you do want to cut up into smaller pieces, because on your first flip of this compost, not everything is going to be broken down, or it's just beginning to break down. So you could be creating a nightmare for yourself if you don't cut these up on like the front end. Like with these tomatoes, or if you're using sweet potato vines or anything like that, you want to make sure that you cut it up on the front end, and it'll just make your life easier for you whenever you come to that first, second, and even third flip. If you could, you know, pile all this stuff up in like a small, shallow windrow, and then run over it through with your lawnmower. If you have a bagger on your lawnmower, even easier, but it should chop everything up pretty well and end up with a pretty nice end product for your compost pile. And with this method, you really don't care if it's already gone to seed or if you're adding weeds to it or anything like that, because all of it's going to be taken care of in this thermophilic process. The only thing that I would make sure that you are absolutely cautious of is making sure it has enough water. Like as of right now, this pile does not have enough water right now. If you don't have enough water, then it's not going to heat up enough, and it's not going to break down and create that fine quality compost like we have over here on this other side of the camera right now. And this whole process realistically could take just 18 days. You could have perfectly well-made, awesome compost, better than anything you can buy at the store, in just 18 days. That's not including the curing times. If you want to amp it up even more, then you could let it cure, make sure everything comes down to ambient temperature. So if it's 80 degrees outside, the center of your compost pile is 80 degrees. That's whenever your fungi start blowing up. And the more you blow up your fungi in your garden, the better your results are going to be in your compost, except for like brassica beds. They have a very special relationship with bacteria, specifically actinobacteria, where they get their nutrients. The actino actually penetrates the root hairs and stuff like that, and they exchange bacteria that way. But that's a very specific bed for you. Alrighty, so you might notice that it is the next day and I'm in a different change of clothes, and that's because a couple of days ago I harvested honey from the bees. They noticed I was here yesterday, and then they started harassing me because they're still not happy with me. So I ended up leaving, and we're starting over again on this second day. But the second, like I was saying before, the second method of reusing basically or composting your garden scraps is literally just building a compost pile. This is the tomato bed. I still have one more tomato to pull out before this is completely clear of everything I want to clear it of. There's still the pepper plants and stuff like that. These are the Thai peppers down here, and then I got some cayennes over here, and you can see there's a ton of peppers on these cayennes. There's one ready to harvest, that bright red one. So I'm going to keep those. Also, I want to see if I can overwinter these guys and have them produce next year as well. You're basically going to take all your weed scraps and you're going to throw them in a compost cage. Now, yesterday before I left, I'd actually filled this up quite a bit, and it sunk down. As you can see, it sunk down maybe 1.5 squares over here on the side, which is also one of the benefits of using this old woven wire fence, is that you have those squares to count and kind of keep track of how much material you have in there, how much of one particular material you have in there, how much it's sunk over time, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm going to continue filling this back up, and then we'll get back to it. And then as you're adding material to this, make sure you kind of tamp it down a little bit, and it'll reduce the amount of settling. You don't want it completely compressed, because you do want airflow and all that type of stuff going through your compost pile, but make sure you tamp it down. Make sure you're not leaving huge gaps in your compost cage or anything like that, and you should have a lot better results as well, especially when it comes to the settling part. Alrighty, so at this point I'm basically going to saturate this entire pile. Don't worry about overwatering it, worry about underwatering it. Any extra water will actually just wick out the sides and the bottom and stuff like that, and that's not really going to be an issue. Also, whenever you're spraying down this cage, make sure you get the sides as well. Get entirely everything that is exposed. You want everything to be nice and wet, because you want to provide a good habitat for these microbes to start reproducing, replicating, thriving, all that type of stuff. This is how you get a complete soil food web as coined by Dr. Elaine Ingham. Say you get a complete soil food web in your garden and make it impervious to any kind of pest, disease, fungus, blight, any type of stuff. All that crap can be eliminated just by making proper compost. Now you're also wondering, like, hey, I've seen you do videos with 3 ingredient, 2 ingredient, all kinds of different types of compost. Why on earth would I do this 1 ingredient if the other ones are better? This just shows you that you don't necessarily have to have all those other ingredients to make really good compost. Is this going to be complete? Is this going to be the best compost you could ever make? No. Is it better than anything that you can buy at the store? Absolutely, and it's going to go a long way in making your garden even better. Let's say at the end of this, it doesn't look like your fine, well broken down compost. That's okay, because it could be used as what Dad calls from Permapastures Farm. It calls it an activated or fortified mulch, basically. You're bringing in mulch to your garden that's bringing in also your microbes and stuff that's just going to make everything work even better. Like, all of your issues in your garden, and I'm not exaggerating and I can't state this enough, all of your issues in the garden can be completely eliminated just by composting. Now, I've shown you 2 different ways to compost. This, which is putting it in a compost cage and actually breaking it down and all that type of stuff. Also, the chop and drop version of compost. The benefit of the chop and drop version of the compost, it's super efficient on time and effort. You're basically cutting it where it stands and then laying it on the ground and letting it decompose that way. The existing microbes will come in, and also that chop and drop method is also providing a very awesome home or environment for the microbes to actually thrive and break stuff down. That's allowing like no direct sunlight. If it rains, it hits the mulch first and then seeps down below, and also retains moisture as well. And then this method, which is basically, view this as like a microbe farm. You're farming your microbes, you're allowing them to reproduce, to replicate, to grow, to expand, all that type of stuff. Also, you're allowing the soil food web to come in. So let's say the bacteria and the fungi come in and they start breaking stuff down. Well, the predators of those are actually going to come in as well, because they see, oh, look at all this food that I can now use. And then once the predators start eating the prey, you get nutrient cycling occurring, and that's prime time for your garden. Also for any, like your pastures and stuff like that. So it works for your pastures, your orchard, your food forest, your garden, all types of stuff. Any living system will basically thrive or be at least benefited from you making compost. So just to keep everything simple, after I completely saturate this thing, like I see water coming out of the bottom and all that type of stuff, after I completely saturate this thing, I'm going to cover the top up with a tarp. And I'm going to let it sit until it starts heating up. And I want it to stay hot for a couple of days. And be careful, like a compost thing like this, a compost setup like this, you're rarely going to get those super high temperatures. So you should be fine unless you start introducing urine or manure or anything like that. You should be fine as far as the super high temperatures go. But you want it to sit for, let's say, I'm not going to flip this until day 4. On day 4, I'm going to flip this, make sure the center, which has gone through the thermophilic process, that's going to kill the pathogens and the weed seeds, the center is going to go to the bottom. The old top is going to go to the center, and the old bottom is going to go to the top. And you're going to do that one more time after a few more days, after it's heated up and killed the pathogens and the weed seeds in the new middle. You're going to do that one more time. And then you're going to let it sit and come down to ambient temperature. Once it comes down to ambient temperature, you know you're thriving on bacteria, fungi, the predators of those two, the protozoa, the nematodes, the microarthropods, the macroarthropods, all that type of stuff. And then you can start using it in your garden. You can start reapplying it to the beds. You can use it as like a little seed starter medium. You can use it as a compost tea, compost extracts, all types of things. So hopefully this video was helpful for you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you.